Let's dive right into this explainer of the Book of Daniel. We're going to witness firsthand exactly how divine providence holds absolute authority over the rise and fall of earthly empires. If you've ever looked around at the chaos of worldly politics and felt totally overwhelmed, this study is going to absolutely anchor your faith. We're looking closely at a text that fundamentally reshapes how we view power, history, and God's ultimate plan for creation, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Lord is completely in control.
We're going to journey chronologically through Daniel chapter 5, Daniel chapter 6, Daniel chapter 7, and Daniel chapter 8.
Let's start right off with Daniel chapter 5, Divine Judgment.
Picture this. It is the final, fateful night of the Babylonian Empire. King Belshazzar is throwing a lavish feast for 1,000 of his lords, but he decides to cross a very dangerous, unforgivable line. He actually orders these sacred golden vessels, the exact items his father Nebuchadnezzar had stolen from God's temple in Jerusalem, to be brought out to the party. By drinking from these sacred temple vessels simply to praise pagan idols of gold, silver, and wood, Belshazzar was directly mocking the living God and practically begging for immediate divine judgment.
Then suddenly, a human hand literally appears out of nowhere and writes a cryptic message right on the plaster of the palace wall. Now notice how Daniel, the aging but ever-faithful prophet, fearlessly interprets this terrifying handwriting. In Daniel chapter 5, verses 25 through 28, he reads, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. He reveals to the king that God meticulously calculates the lifespan of all worldly powers. Mene means God has numbered the days of the empire. Tekel means the king has been weighed on moral scales and found severely lacking. And Upharsin or Perez means the kingdom is shattered and handed over to the Medes and Persians.
What a moment, right? It really reveals the horrific cost of pride. And Scripture doesn't draw this out into a long, dramatic war. In Daniel chapter 5, verses 30 through 31, it states with chilling brevity, "That very night Belshazzar the Chaldean king was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom." In just one single night, the mighty, world-dominating Babylonian empire collapsed exactly as God ordained. The arrogance of man is absolutely nothing before the providence of God. Moving right along to Daniel chapter 6, Faithful Prayer.
Here we see a massive clash of authority. We've now shifted to the new Medo-Persian Empire, where jealous officials who couldn't find a single ounce of corruption in Daniel's work manipulate King Darius into signing a deadly, unchangeable law. For 30 days, no one could pray to any god or man except a king, and the penalty? The lion's den. This sets up a direct, incredibly high-stakes conflict between flawed human legislation and God's perfect, sovereign command. But the most vital lesson for us is found right here in Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. The scripture tells us, when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God. He didn't hide. He didn't change up his routine. Daniel knew the deadly consequences, yet he prioritized his gratitude and his spiritual relationship with God way above his own physical safety. He trusted God's plan completely. We all know what happens next, but I want you to consider the deep theological significance of this moment. Daniel is thrown into the pit. Yet, because he trusted in God's plan rather than fearing worldly execution, divine providence literally shut the mouths of the lions. God sent his angel to protect his faithful servant, proving once and for all that the creator of life holds absolute mastery over the creatures of the earth. This miraculous deliverance actually prompts King Darius himself to issue a totally new decree. We read in Daniel chapter 6, verse 26, "He is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end." A pagan king is literally forced to acknowledge this awe-inspiring truth. It beautifully summarizes the eternal nature of God's kingdom, which will always outlast every earthly ruler.
And that brings us to Daniel chapter 7, Eternal Kingdom.
The text makes a really profound shift here. We move away from historical events and right into majestic, apocalyptic visions of God's ultimate plan. In a night vision, God reveals a prophetic timeline of 4 great beasts rising from a stormy sea. These beasts represent 4 successive earthly empires that are going to dominate history. You have the lion with eagle's wings, which is Babylon. The bear, raised on one side, representing Medo-Persia. The leopard with 4 wings is Greece. And finally, a terrifying iron-toothed 4th beast represents the Roman Empire and the worldly powers that follow, leading all the way up to their ultimate destruction. Now, amidst the chaos of that terrifying 4th beast, a boastful, blasphemous little horn emerges, representing a fierce anti-God authority. But notice the incredible contrast as the scene shifts from the chaotic, stormy sea up to the heavenly court. The Ancient of Days, God the Father, takes his majestic seat. Daniel chapter 7 verse 10 tells us that a stream of fire issued and came out from before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. God is executing holy judgment, proving that evil's reign is strictly temporary.
This brings us to what is arguably the most glorious theological moment in the entire text. Listen to this powerful passage from Daniel chapter 7, verses 13 through 14. And behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. To him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. This reveals the ultimate victor, the one who will rule over all nations forever.
The identity of this figure changes absolutely everything. The Son of Man is a divine title directly prefiguring Jesus Christ. In fact, this is the very title Jesus used most frequently for himself in the New Testament. So while earthly, beastly empires are terrifying, they have an expiration date. But the kingdom of Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, is indestructible, eternal, and promises ultimate everlasting victory for the saints.
Finally, let's look at Daniel chapter 8, prophetic providence.
In this chapter, God provides even more specific historical details regarding the trials his people are going to face. This vision uses animal imagery again, but really narrows the focus down. A two-horned ram and an incredibly swift male goat meticulously map out the coming clash between the Medo-Persian Empire and Greece. The vision actually predicts the goat's great horn breaking, which represents Alexander the Great's sudden death right at the height of his power, and then the subsequent division of its empire into 4 kingdoms by his generals. And from one of these, another wicked ruler, a defiling little horn, arises.
The devastation caused by this little horn is severe. Daniel chapter 8, verse 12 says it cast truth to the ground and profaned the daily sacrifices at the sanctuary. Historically, this points very accurately to the tyrannical Antiochus Epiphanes, who brutally persecuted the Jewish people. But prophetically, it points ahead to the ultimate Antichrist in the last days. This horn embodies the absolute climax of human rebellion against God's holy order and creation.
But here, right in the midst of all this, is where we find immense hope. When an angel asks how long this devastation is going to last, the answer is so precise. Daniel chapter 8, verse 14 declares, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state." This provides the deepest comfort we can hold on to as believers. No matter how dark the persecution gets, God has set a precise, unchangeable expiration date on evil. His timing is absolutely perfect, and his sanctuary will be fully cleansed. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to reflect deeply on where your anchor holds. Because every earthly empire from Babylon to Rome and beyond has fallen or will inevitably fall. But those who trust in divine providence, those who kneel before the Ancient of Days and the Son of Man, will inherit an everlasting kingdom. So, when the world demands you bow to its idols, will you, just like Daniel, keep your windows open toward heaven and pray to the living God?